Working so hard, yet performing poorly. You must be incompetent, just so you know. My husband is doing well with his promotions, now earning $200,000 a year. What about you, barely making $40,000? I suppose please refrain from speaking ill of my husband. As I showed my anger, my sister-in-law Grace said in a mocking tone, "Did I hit a nerve? I'm sorry. It's just the truth. And that's why you're upset. My family is wealthy, and I just can't understand the feelings of poor people like you. Oh, by the way, invite us over sometime. I'm curious to see how poor people like you live." My husband looked Grace in the eye and replied with a smile, "All right then, I understand if that's how you feel. We'll invite you." I'm Chloe, 30 years old, a working mother in my second year of marriage, currently pregnant. I switched to remote work after discussing with my boss, working from home. My husband Ryan was my classmate in college, quiet and reserved, but with a strong heart. I found myself unable to look away from him. We got closer after working together on the executive committee for a cultural festival and started dating. Our relationship smoothly continued without any major arguments, and he proposed when I was 28. With Ryan's parents having passed away in an accident a few years ago, I moved into his parents' house where he was living alone. His elder sister Zoe, a year senior, was a busy car park worker living abroad on a long business trip. She recently returned home and started living with us in the parents' house. Zoe is a straightforward and caring person. Ryan and Zoe, both busy with work, left most of the household chores to me, but they were considerate and helped whenever they could. Balancing work and house life was tough, but not overly so. One holiday, as the three of us cleaned the house and did laundry, I took a break in the now tidy room when Ryan's phone rang unexpectedly. There seemed to be some trouble at work, and he hurriedly got ready to leave. As I saw him off at the door, Ryan said with a worried look, "Chloe, I'm sorry, I can't go with you today. Call me if anything happens, don't overdo it." We had planned to go to my parents' house today with some grapes given by Ryan's boss. "It's okay, be careful yourself. Bye," I replied cheerfully, and Ryan left for work with a look of sadness. Since my pregnancy, Ryan has become overly worried. Originally, I planned to return to the office after the stable period, but Ryan strongly opposed it, so I continued working from home. Even today while cleaning. "Watch out for that step. I'll take care of the rest, Chloe." He was fussing over me. It seemed things would get even more challenging once the baby arrived. Thinking this, I went back to the living room where Zoe spoke up. "I've always thought this, but Ryan is quite the worrier, isn't he?" "Yes, he is. I can imagine him telling our grown-up child to be home before dark," I said with a troubled smile. And Zoe laughed. "I doubt that. They won't be small forever. When I was late from overtime, he came to pick me up from work, said it was getting dark and dangerous." I shared, and Zoe replied with a wry smile, "Really? That's not just worrying. That's overprotective. Must be tough for you, Chloe." "Oh, I'm planning to make a fruit toast later. Let's eat it together." Zoe loved baking, and her skills were professional grade. Her desserts were delicate, beautiful, and most importantly, delicious. I had become a fan of Zoe's sweets. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to it." Being married to a kind husband and having a good relationship with Zoe, everything seemed perfect. But even I had my worries. "I'm home, Chloe. I thought you would come with your husband today. You're alone." I had brought the grapes to share with my parents visiting their home alone. I was greeted by another sister-in-law, Grace. "Grace, you're here too. My husband had to work due to a call from his company." "Your husband works for some small, unknown company, right? Leaving his pregnant wife alone on a holiday to work. You must be having a hard time, plus living with your husband's sister in his family home." I couldn't stand it. I felt irritated by her condescending tone, but replied calmly, "That's not true at all. My sister-in-law is a wonderful person, and she treats me very well. We all support each other and live harmoniously. No need to pretend. It must be miserable having to live cautiously in your in-law's house because of a husband who doesn't earn much. Agree, my brother and sister-in-law got married just 6 months ago. Alex, who works for a famous top-tier company, fell in love with Grace, a colleague, and married her. Looking back, She seemed to have disliked me from our first meeting. The first time I met Grace, when Alex left the table for a moment, she said, "Nice to meet you, Chloe. Alex often talks about you. Which company do you work for?" "Just so you know, I work at the same famous company as Alex." "Really?" That's impressive. I'm not as talented as Alex, so I don't work for a famous company." When I responded, Grace looked down on me and said, "I see. Alex always praised you, but it seems you're not that special after all." Since then, Grace seemed to have deemed me beneath her. She acted normally in front of my parents or Alex, but when we were alone, she became mean-spirited. I found Grace difficult to deal with, but since we lived apart and rarely met, I tried not to let it bother me. One day, I visited the hospital with Ryan to see our grandmother. She had been hospitalized 4 months earlier due to health issues. Busy with work, we hadn't been able to visit, but finally made it this time. "Grandmother, it's been a while. Sorry we couldn't visit sooner. Work has been busy." As we greeted her, Grandmother smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry about it. You're busy with work. It can't be helped. Thank you for coming today. I'm so happy to see you both. My medication is working well, and I've been feeling great. I can even eat my favorite chicken now." "Just don't eat too much," I said with concern. Grandmother left after chatting for a while. Grandmother seemed a bit tired and sleepy. We promised to visit again and left her room. "Grandmother looked well, didn't she?" "Yeah, that was good to see." As Ryan and I were walking to the parking lot, discussing this, a voice suddenly called from behind. "Oh, Chloe, what a coincidence." I turned around with a sense of dread and saw Grace approaching with a malicious smile. "So you came to visit Grandmother. She often says she wants to see her family. I visit her every week, but I guess you have been too busy with work, Chloe. Working so hard yet earning so little, you must be incompetent." "Please refrain from speaking ill of my husband," as I got angry, Grace said with a mocking tone. "Did I hit a nerve? I'm sorry, it's just the truth." "And that's why you're upset? I can understand the feelings of poor people. Coming from a wealthy family myself, I was deeply infuriated by Grace's gleeful tone. Ryan also looked stern, looking down at us. Grace continued, "Oh, invite us to your house next time. I'm curious to see how poor people like you live. I, for one, live in a high-rise in an upscale neighborhood. My husband, the breadwinner, earns $200,000 a year, and I'm a competent employee of the same company you work at." At the same company as Alex?" Ryan asked, surprised. Grace boasted, "Yes. Unlike you, we are a couple working at a renowned company. Before marriage, my dad bought me anything I wanted, and now I live a lavish life in a luxurious high-rise with my husband earning $200,000. I'm so curious how poor people like you live in dirty places with such meager earnings." Then Ryan, looking straight into Grace's eyes, answered with a smile, "All right, we'll invite you. I think you'll be surprised." "What do you mean by that? Is your place so old it's like a ruin?" "Can't wait to see." Grace skipped away, lost in her fanciful thoughts. We exchanged glances and chuckled at her ignorance. Days later, when we picked up Grace from the station and brought her home, she said in a dissatisfied tone, "This is quite ordinary. Not what I expected. Did you clear it up for me?" "No matter how much you tidy, you'll never reach wealthy people like us," Ryan replied, his face expressing disbelief. But Grace seemed unconvinced. "Well, whatever, but the inside is full of cheap stuff. Show me quickly." I was beyond anger and simply astounded at her childish behavior. Please come in." As I opened the front door, Grace excitedly entered, but soon let out a short scream and stepped back. "Why are you here?" "Well, this is my house. Welcome. I've been waiting for you." Zoe stood at the entrance with a smile. Grace looked pale as she stared at the smiling Zoe. "Grace, you work at the same company as Alex, right?" "That means the same company as Zoe?" Ryan asked innocently. And Zoe replied with a mischievous smile, "Of course I know her. Grace and her husband are my subordinates, right, Grace?" As Zoe smiled sharply, Grace pulled my arm, stepping outside and whispered aggressively, "I didn't know you lived with the department head. Why didn't you tell me? I wasn't asked." Frantic, she said, "Chloe, I apologize for everything. Please don't tell the department head. If she finds out... What is it that you don't want me to find out? I suddenly realized that Zoe was standing right behind us, arms crossed, glaring coldly at Grace. By the way, Grace, I heard you were hurling terrible insults at Ryan and others, calling them incompetent, mocking people for their income, and speaking such rude words. I didn't know you were this kind of person. Zoe spoke calmly, and Grace turned pale, apologizing and speaking with teary eyes. Manager, I'm terribly sorry for being disrespectful to your family members. I'll be more careful in the future. Please forgive me. Forgive me. Zoe sighed in exasperation and said, You're apologizing to the wrong person. Then Grace turned towards us and repeated her apology. It was a hollow apology, unpleasant to listen to, probably just to save face in front of her superior. Zoe Ryan Elmy was too astounded to say anything. Do you really feel sorry? You don't seem to be reflecting, I said with a cold expression. And Grace yelled back defensively, I am reflecting. I am apologizing because I realized I did something wrong. You should read the room. It's because of your attitude that Grace started to say something mean to me as usual, but she realized her situation mid-sentence. She turned deadly pale and began to sweat profusely. Zoe let out a deep sigh, and with a cold look said, I am disappointed in you. You're diligent and accurate at work, and I had high hopes. But I didn't know you had such a terrible personality. I'm utterly disgusted. Grace seemed shocked and just sat down crying. It's just that I was jealous. Alex is so fond of Chloe. I just wanted to say something mean, and it felt good, so I couldn't stop. What? We're not your punching bag, I said, interrupting her. I have to tell Alex about this, I murmured, and Grace begged in panic. No, don't. Alex might divorce me if he finds out. If it was out of jealousy, maybe Alex would forgive you if you gallantly reflect, Ryan said with a look of disgust, but Grace just hung her head in shame. Later, we reported everything to Alex. At first, Alex seemed unable to comprehend and was shocked, but his expression gradually turned grim. By the time he understood everything, he was visibly angry. I can't believe you said such terrible things to Chloe and others. Do you realize how terrible your actions were? You wouldn't have apologized if the manager wasn't there. You're the worst. I'm so disappointed, Alex yelled at a shrunken Grace in the corner, then turned to my husband and me and apologized quietly. Chloe, Ryan, I'm sorry for the trouble caused because I married someone as malicious as Grace without knowing. Alex is not to blame. If she changes her attitude, we won't mind anymore. We have become family through many marriages after all. We would rather get along than harass each other, I said. When I said this, Alex and his family expressed their gratitude with happy faces. This is how we reconciled. Since then, Grace has stopped mocking and verbally abusing us. It seems that Alex has sternly warned her that if she behaves maliciously towards others again, they will divorce. Grace now only offers minimal greetings when we meet and remains silent. She seems to be reflecting, and it would be harsh to stir up more trouble. We decided together to let bygones be bygones. However, 2 months later, we received unexpected news. Alex and Grace had divorced. According to Alex, Grace had initially behaved well, but she began bragging about her education and family background to junior colleagues at work and behaved maliciously towards them, just as she had with us. This led to a junior colleague developing mental health issues, creating a problem in the process. What she did to us somehow spread throughout the company, leading her to be ostracized and working in a very difficult environment. Eventually, she became emotionally unstable and made unbelievable mistakes, ultimately having a breakdown, leaving the company. Now she has returned to her parents' home and is shut away. 2 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy and returned home from the hospital. Now busy with my first experience of parenting. Although I constantly felt tired due to lack of sleep, looking at my son made all the fatigue worthwhile. Ryan and Zoe also loved the baby, and our home was filled with happiness. One holiday, Alex came to meet the baby. He hesitantly held my son, deeply moved by his beautiful eyes and warmth. Alex, who had been downcast about his lack of judgment during the divorce, was now earnestly engaged in his work and thriving. My son, held by Alex, looked at him and seemed to fall asleep comfortably. Seeing this, I couldn't help but smile.